By the 42nd day without rain, every cornfield in Red Mesa Valley had turned the color of old rope. Every field, except the strange little farm that the neighbors had laughed at all spring. Green bean vines wrapped around Rosa Navarro's corn, while broad squash leaves covered the earth beneath them. The plants were tired. Some were burned along the edges. But they were alive. Across the fences, thousands of bare corn stalks rattled in the heat like dry bones. That morning, the same farmers who had mocked Rosa came walking toward her gate with empty seed sacks. Walter Crane came with them. He owned the mill, held Rosa's debt, and carried an offer that could save her farm. All she had to do was sell him every surviving ear and leave the rest of the valley with nothing to plant. Rosa looked at the desperate families beyond her fence and remembered the last lesson her mother had given her. A field survives because its plants stand together. People are not so different. 4 months earlier, nobody in Red Mesa Valley believed Rosa's field would produce anything worth saving. It was the spring of 1891 in New Mexico territory, and winter had left almost no moisture behind. Dust already moved along the road in thin sheets, gathering against fences and the walls of adobe homes. Most families depended on the narrow irrigation ditch that carried mountain water into the valley. Rosa owned 12 acres near the end of that ditch, where every upstream farmer drank before her land did. Her husband had died beneath a frightened horse 2 years earlier, leaving Rosa with the farm and its unpaid note. She also had a daughter named Lena, who was 12 and old enough to understand when adults were worried. The note belonged to Walter Crane, whose mill bought nearly every sack of grain grown in the valley. If Rosa brought in a proper harvest, she could make the payment due after summer. If the field failed, Walter had the legal right to take 6 of her best acres. Walter was not a cruel man, but he believed numbers more quickly than he believed people. In March, he advised every farmer to plant corn in long, separate rows that could be worked fast with a horse. The method looked clean, used land efficiently, and had produced heavy harvests during several generous summers. Rosa listened from the back of the mill while men discussed row spacing, plows, and which seed grew tallest. Beside her feet sat a clay jar that had belonged to her mother, Teresa. Inside were 3 cloth packets. One held corn, one held climbing beans. The last held squash seed. Teresa had grown food in dry country for more than 50 years without ever calling her method unusual. She planted corn in small groups, then added beans after the young stalks were strong enough to carry them. Squash spread between the groups and covered the open ground before summer could bake it bare. Each plant occupied a different space, and no part of the field was expected to face the season alone. Teresa also shaped the earth into shallow basins so rain would settle near the roots instead of escaping downhill. She covered the soil with dry grass and old leaves to slow the loss of moisture. As a child, Rosa had asked why her mother did not plant straight rows like the larger farms. Teresa answered, "Straight lines please the eye. Living roots must please the land." After the meeting at the mill, Walter noticed Rosa's 3 seed packets and asked what she intended to plant. Rosa explained the method simply: corn for height, beans to climb, squash to protect the soil. Walter said the vines would tangle her field and make cultivation slower when weeds appeared. A farmer named Ben Foster overheard them and joked that Rosa was planting a garden where a crop should be. Several men laughed, not viciously, but with the easy confidence of people certain that experience belonged only to them. Rosa carried her jar home and began marking shallow circles across the driest part of her land. Lena followed with a hoe, though she kept glancing toward the neighboring fields where the rows looked straight and proper. She asked why they had to plant differently when being different already gave the town enough reason to watch them. Rosa told her that a field did not survive by avoiding the opinions of people standing outside its fence. Together, they loosened the centers of the basins and mixed in old manure from the winter goat pen. Rosa pressed corn seed into the darkened earth, using the same distance her mother had measured with one open hand. She did not plant the beans yet. A young cornstalk could not support a vine before it learned to support itself. Around each basin, Lena spread dry grass until very little naked soil remained beneath the spring sun. The finished field looked uneven and unfinished beside Ben Foster's long rows across the road. His hired plow had covered 3 times as much ground, while Rosa and Lena were still shaping basins by hand. Ben called across the fence that the harvest would arrive before Rosa finished preparing for it. Rosa answered that she hoped the harvest would be patient enough to wait. The first corn shoots appeared after 9 days, small green points breaking through circles of dry grass. Ben's field had emerged earlier and more evenly. From the road, it already looked far more successful. Walter rode out to inspect the farms that owed grain or money to his mill. He studied Rosa's scattered plants and quietly calculated how little corn 12 acres might produce that way. He offered her another sack of his best seed and said she still had time to plow everything under. Rosa thanked him, but she refused. Walter reminded her that memory would not change the date written on her loan. Rosa placed one hand over the clay seed jar and said memory had taught her how to reach that date. When the corn reached the height of Lena's hand, they planted beans around the strongest stalks. A week later, thin vines found the corn and began winding upward without being tied. Squash appeared last, pushing broad leaves across the shaded spaces between the basins. The field soon became difficult to cross without stepping over a vine or brushing against a leaf. Lena complained that Ben's daughter could walk between their rows without looking at her feet. Rosa replied, "Then she has a fine path. We are trying to grow food." Yet even Rosa felt doubt when she compared the fields in late May. Ben's corn stood taller, straighter, and nearly identical from one end of his land to the other. Rosa's plants varied. Some basins were vigorous, others remained short. A few did not grow at all. Her method did not make every seed strong, and it offered no promise against every possible failure. It was only a way of giving each living plant more than one kind of help. The last useful rain fell on the 2nd day of June. Water filled Rosa's shallow basins and remained there long after the road had dried. In the straight fields, much of the same rain ran along the packed furrows and collected near the lower fences. Ben noticed the difference, but one storm did not outweigh years of success in his mind. A week passed without rain, then another. The wind shifted south and began arriving hot before breakfast. By noon, metal tools burned bare hands. Chickens hid beneath wagons, and cattle crowded every strip of shade. The irrigation ditch shrank until its water could no longer reach every farm on the same day. Families met beside the wooden gate that divided the flow and argued over hours, acres, and whose crop needed water most. Because Rosa lived near the end of the ditch, every delay upstream reached her as an empty channel. Walter proposed a schedule that gave each property a short turn according to the size of its debt and planted acreage. Rosa received less water because much of her land appeared covered by squash instead of marketable corn. She objected once, then stopped wasting breath on people who could not see value beyond a mill scale. When her turn arrived after dark, Rosa and Lena opened the gate and guided the weak flow into the first basin. The water settled around the roots instead of racing toward the far end of the property. They moved it from basin to basin with a shovel, losing as little as possible to bare ground. Before sunrise, the ditch went dry again. Lena asked how long the plants could endure if their next turn brought no water. Rosa answered honestly. She did not know. That morning, she pushed her fingers beneath the dry grass covering one basin. The surface felt hot, but the earth below remained cool enough to hold together in her hand. Across the road, Ben's exposed soil had already cracked between the rows. His corn still looked impressive from a distance, but its lower leaves had begun curling inward. The plants were conserving what little moisture remained, and the field was warning anyone willing to listen. Ben increased the flow during his next turn and kept it for nearly an hour beyond the agreed time. When Rosa confronted him, he pointed toward his wide field and said more plants required more water. Rosa pointed toward the empty channel below his gate and said every extra minute came from someone else's roots. Ben released the water, but the argument changed nothing about the sky. The next week would test every field in Red Mesa, and it would test what kind of neighbors the drought had made. If you enjoy stories about old wisdom proving its value when easy answers fail, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. The hottest part of Rosa's story was still ahead. By the middle of June, the valley stopped measuring the heat and began measuring what it destroyed. Milk spoiled inside shaded kitchens. Leather harnesses cracked. Young fruit dropped from trees before it could ripen. In the cornfields, pale tassels appeared too early, and the wind carried almost no useful pollen between them. Ben's tallest stalks began drying from the bottom, one leaf after another. He worked from darkness until noon, drawing water from his well and pouring it into the nearest furrows. Most of that water soaked only the upper soil or disappeared into cracks before reaching the deeper roots. Rosa watered less often, but each small amount remained inside the basins beneath the cover of grass and leaves. The squash shaded the ground during the cruelest hours of the afternoon. The corn gave the bean vines a path upward, keeping their leaves away from the hottest soil. Their roots reached through different levels of earth, so they did not all search the same narrow layer for moisture. Nothing about the arrangement created water. It simply made every drop work longer before the heat could take it. Even so, the outer edge of Rosa's field began to fail. 7 basins nearest the road turned brown, and no amount of care brought them back. Lena cried while pulling the dead plants because those were the first circles she had shaped alone. Rosa let her grieve, then saved every dry leaf to cover the soil around plants that still lived. Her mother's method did not prevent loss. It taught them how one loss might protect something that remained. Ben came to the fence one evening and asked whether Rosa had found a hidden spring beneath her field. She invited him inside, lifted the ground cover, and showed him the damp soil underneath. Ben pressed his own fingers into it and looked across the road at the dust rising between his rows. He asked why Rosa had not explained this before everyone planted. Rosa reminded him that she had explained it at the mill while he was busy naming her field a garden. Ben accepted the answer without defending himself. It was too late to replant corn, but Rosa showed him how to cover the roots of his remaining stalks. Lena watched her mother help the man who had laughed at them and asked why they should spend time on his field. Rosa said, "Because heat does not stop at the fence after it finishes with your enemy." For 2 days, several families spread straw, weeds, and cut grass across the least damaged rows. The work slowed the dying, but it could not reverse weeks of lost moisture. Ben's corn had grown too long without protection, and its shallow feeder roots had already burned. By early July, no green field remained in the valley except Rosa's central acres. Her corn was shorter than the crop Walter had expected, and many ears had not filled completely. But bean pods hung beneath the leaves, squash swelled in the shade, and enough corn had survived to make seed. People began stopping along the road without laughing. Some asked questions. Some counted ears. Others simply stared at proof they wished they had respected earlier. Walter Crane arrived with a notebook and spent an hour walking around the field without entering it. He calculated the value of every ear, bean pod, and squash that might reach his mill or the territorial market. The drought had raised food prices far beyond anything the valley had seen in recent years. Walter offered enough money for the entire crop to erase Rosa's debt and leave her with a small profit. The condition was simple. He wanted exclusive ownership of the harvest, including every seed suitable for planting. A grain dealer in Santa Fe had promised him an excellent price for seed proven to survive a dry season. Rosa asked what the farmers of Red Mesa would plant the following spring. Walter answered that seed could be ordered from the east if families still had money to buy it. They both knew most families would have neither money nor time after losing an entire harvest. Walter reminded Rosa that 6 of her acres would become his if she missed the payment. He was offering certainty in a year that had destroyed nearly every other promise. Rosa asked for one night to consider the offer. After he left, she placed the clay seed jar on the kitchen table between herself and Lena. The jar was nearly empty. Teresa's original seed now lived outside in the only field the heat had spared. Lena said selling would save their home, which was what every month of work had been meant to do. Rosa agreed, and that made the choice harder rather than easier. Near midnight, soft footsteps sounded beside the back wall, followed by the scrape of wood against the field gate. Rosa took a lantern outside and found Ben's youngest son, crouched between two rows with a sack in his hands. The boy had picked 6 green ears and was reaching for a 7th when the light found him. He dropped the sack and began apologizing before Rosa asked a single question. His family had eaten their last flour that morning, and Ben was too ashamed to ask Rosa for food. Rosa looked at the stolen corn and understood that the valley's need had already entered her field. A fence could delay that need, but it could not make hungry families disappear. She filled the boy's sack with corn, beans, and 1 small squash, then walked him home. Ben stood in his doorway with the expression of a man who had run out of both pride and alternatives. He promised to repay every ear, but Rosa asked for something different. She told him to bring every family to her field after sunrise with paper, charcoal, and 3 empty sacks. By morning, more than 30 people stood outside Rosa's gate. Walter arrived expecting her answer and found the valley gathered around the crop he intended to purchase. Rosa accepted that part of the harvest belonged to her debt because a promise did not vanish when keeping it became painful. Another part would feed her household through winter. The remaining seed would be divided among the families of Red Mesa, together with the method Teresa had taught her. Walter said the portion offered to his mill would not cover the full payment. Rosa answered that taking her land would give him 6 more acres of dead soil and no farmer able to plant them. Ben stepped forward and offered 2 weeks of labor at the mill in exchange for extending Rosa's note. Another farmer offered wagon repairs. A third offered firewood. Then nearly every family promised something it could provide. Walter looked from the names in his notebook to the only living crop in the valley. Numbers still mattered to him, and the numbers now showed that an empty valley could not support a working mill. He extended Rosa's payment until the following harvest and accepted 1 wagon load of corn and beans as interest. It was not charity. It was the first calculation Walter made that included the survival of everyone around him. Rosa spent the next 3 days teaching instead of harvesting. She showed the families how to shape shallow basins and cover the earth before the sun reached its highest point. She explained that the corn must grow strong before the beans were planted around it. She showed how squash could protect open soil and how dead plants could become cover instead of waste. She also told them the truth. The method could not call rain, cure ruined roots, or guarantee a harvest. It could only help plants share space, use water carefully, and endure longer together than they might alone. Each family received corn, beans, and squash seed in 3 separate cloth packets. In return, each one promised to preserve part of the next harvest for another family. Ben was the first to sign his name beneath the promise. Lena watched the man who had mocked their garden carry its seed home as carefully as church silver. That winter was lean, and no generous ending could change that. Meals became smaller. Several families sold livestock. Rosa burned fence posts when ordinary firewood ran low. Yet no household in Red Mesa abandoned its land, and no child went without food for an entire day. When spring returned, the valley no longer looked divided into isolated rectangles of a single crop. Corn rose from shallow basins. Beans followed. Squash began spreading over soil that had once been left bare. Not every farmer copied Rosa exactly. Each family adjusted the method to its ground, tools, and available water. Ben kept several straight rows near the road, but behind them he planted the largest mixed field in the valley. Walter changed the irrigation schedule so water reached farms by household need, not merely by planted acreage. Lena carried Teresa's clay jar from farm to farm, collecting fresh seed after every successful harvest. By the following autumn, Rosa paid the remaining debt without selling the seed families had promised to pass forward. Years later, visitors sometimes asked which single plant had saved Red Mesa during the Great Heat. Rosa always told them the question was wrong. The corn alone had not survived. Neither had the beans, the squash, the covered soil, or the careful basins. The strength came from the way those separate things worked together when water became scarce. Teresa had taught Rosa a way to plant, but the heat revealed that her lesson reached far beyond one field. If Rosa's crop had been yours, would you have sold everything to save your farm or shared the seed with the valley? Share your choice in the comments. Then, like this video and subscribe for more stories about survival, courage, and hard-earned wisdom in the American West.